What has been the most bone-chilling, hair-raising, let's get the heck out of here experience? Story 1. I'm a criminal defense investigator. I had a murder case involving two brothers. The one accused of the murders was very autistic, and his brother was a schizophrenic. The schizophrenic brother lived in a potato shack in the middle of the desert. I needed to talk to him several times throughout the course of the investigation, and since he didn't have a phone or electricity, I had to drive several hours to his house and yell his name from the fence line until he came out of the shack. The investigation lasted for several years, and over time, I developed a rapport with the schizophrenic brother, and I kind of got to like him. He would talk your ear off about the aliens with golden eyes, and the underground tunnels that connect all the Walmarts in the country, but he's pretty entertaining, and part of me wonders how much of it was a show. The schizophrenic brother eventually gets a girlfriend. She's a tweaker who has mistaken his schizophrenia for meth-induced psychosis. I talked to her a few times in jail when she was sober, and she was surprisingly charming and insightful. The last time I go to see the schizophrenic brother, it's a dark winter night and Tweaker girlfriend is there. She's lurking in the shadows and staring daggers at me the entire time I'm talking to him. I cut off his conversation about the speakers and his feelings and walk back to my truck to leave. A minute later, the schizophrenic brother comes running out and tells me that he wants to show me something in the shack. He's never invited me inside before, and I'm not thrilled by the prospect. The whole thing feels off to me, so I tell him I have to get going and start the truck. The look of the relief on his face when I declined to go inside convinced me that Tweaker girlfriend was waiting behind the door with a hammer or something. A few months later, I learned that she shot him in his sleep and stashed his body in an old refrigerator. She since pled guilty to his murder. Yeah, the lady was definitely gonna hit a hit marker on you, my guy. Story 2. One time I was out in Colorado with some buddies hiking near the top of a mountain. Some bad weather started to roll in, but the top was only 15 minutes away, so I went ahead while they went back down. As I was getting to the top, I felt static in the air, and the hair in my head started to stand up. I immediately started to panic because I thought I was about to get struck by lightning, so naturally, I ran down without ever getting to the top. I'm not sure if I was going to get struck, but I sure as hell wasn't sticking around to find out. Story 3. I worked a lot in the remote areas of West Texas, servicing oil field related equipment. One time I was out in the middle of nowhere as usual, and to the northeast was a butte. An isolated hill that's bigger than a regular hill, but smaller than a mountain. But everywhere else around was pretty flat. There was one road in and out of the site I was at. At some point, when I was working on a control box, I had the overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I scanned the horizon, looked all around the butte, and went back to work. This happened a few more times within several minutes until I finally saw something move on the side of one of the rock outcroppings on the butte. I went to my truck, grabbed my binoculars, and the figure hid behind the outcropping. It was definitely a human. I glassed him out for a good 20 minutes, and I could see him peek around every couple of minutes. Eventually, he leaned out so far that I could see the silhouette of the barrel of a rifle slung around his back. At some point, he was hidden behind his rock for a while, and the next time he peeked out, I couldn't see the rifle. He had either put it down somewhere, or he was now holding it. I immediately felt a sense of impending doom. The hair on my arms and neck was standing straight up. I very quickly collected my tools, got my AR-15 from behind the driver's seat, and sat it on the passenger seat, and tore it out of there. I sped down the dirt road, almost clipped the cattle guard, and started cruising down the hallway just as the adrenaline started to wear off. I remember the metal taste in my mouth and having to grip the steering wheel to keep my fingers from twitching. A few miles down the road, a maroon Suburban full of guys was pulled over on the oncoming side of the road. They definitely weren't oil field workers. Shades all around, buzz heads, all intently looking at me. I expected them to pull a U-turn and pursue me, but they didn't. I can't prove that this is what was happening, but I do know that cartel guys run operations where one scouts for guys working alone and calls in a group of guys to rob them of their trucks and tools. Story 4. I was walking from a local shopping mall to the train station so I could go home. The shortcut went through a huge long tunnel and was out of sight from the road and wasn't used unless you knew the area. When I got to the tunnel, I looked up and saw one guy standing right at the other end of the tunnel, in the middle, just looking my direction, like he was waiting. Every hair on my body stood on end. I felt like I needed to vomit. Before I knew what I was doing, my feet turned me around and started walking fast away. He started walking after me and said, "Don't worry, it's not like I was going to argue." I ran and walked right on the edge of the highway in plain view of cars in case he ran after me. I couldn't stop shaking for an hour. Story 5. In very early 2020, I was in Labini, Nepal. It's a small town built around this complex of ruins that was once the palatial home of Siddhartha, Guam. The Bodhi tree is located there. I was staying in a cheap hotel along a muddy road leading out of the city and was the only guest in the building. Many stray dogs roamed the streets of that quarter at night, and you'd often hear them barking or getting into fights. This one night was particularly bad. A low fog had settled on the road, and the dogs were out in force, howling and barking. Out of nowhere came this bellowing roar, one so loud and sonorous. I felt in my chest, then a vacuum of complete silence. All I could think of were ways to keep whoever had made that sound outside. The next day, I heard that a tiger had wandered over the nearby reserve along the lake and eaten a few of those stray dogs. Can we get a little RIP for the dogs? That's so depressing. I was like, that's scary. That means this person was actually near a tiger. Do you know how strong a tiger is? Literally, their tongues are so powerful that if they were to lick you, it can literally take skin off. Story 6. I must have been around 10 or 12 when this has happened. I was walking back home one afternoon, around 3 or 4 p.m. after strolling around the neighborhood, which was usually very safe, friendly, and quiet. I was on the opposite side of the block, the house is behind ours, which wasn't an issue because there happened to be a park that went across the whole block and connected to the other side. So you didn't have to go around the whole block, so I was only a few houses away. I went through the park, a park I had played in my entire childhood without paying much attention. When about halfway through, this guy who I didn't know, definitely older than me, wearing a hoodie, started calling me. Dude, come over here one sec. What do you want? Come here, I just want to ask you something. Okay, ask me from over there. No, come over here please. No, tell me from over there. At that point, another dude that was sitting next to him gets upset. I hear a, that's it. They both stood up quickly and started making their ways towards me. I can't recall how far they chased after me, but my instincts just told me to run like hell, and I did. To this day, I still don't know if they were gonna mug me, if they were just taking the piss, or what was happening. But it definitely scared kid me. Now, they're definitely gonna mug you or something. Because if they're getting upset that you're not coming over there, like, there's no reason why they would be upset. For them to actually get upset by the situation and to start chasing you, it just shows they had very malicious intent. Story 7. This is very similar to a situation that happened to me. I was 10 on Main Street in a small town. Just a long row of shops on either side of the road. I was only 2 blocks from home. It was midday. An old red pickup drove by, a 20-year-old driver, and 4 20-year-olds in the bed. They gestured over to me, and all 4 men hopped out at once and darted for me. I had a 30 feet head start and sprinted for my life. I came to a small crack between the buildings, maybe a 7-inch space. I slid between it just as they caught up to me. One of them reached out, and his fingers caught my shirt, but couldn't grasp me in time. They were too large to fit. I shuffled along the building, and they came around the long way to get me. I'd broken line of sight through and sprinted to a nearby good place to hide and stayed in a bush for over an hour, terrified. I don't know what they wanted from me, and I'm glad I didn't have to find out. I never felt safe again, and I always thought they would come to my home. Story 8. My wife and I were on a search mission for some missing fern pickers. We were volunteers with the local search and rescue (SAR) team. We decided to stay in the search area that night and had built a pretty nice fire. We were sitting there, and it was about 2 a.m., hoping this dude would wander into camp. I had heard animals around us throughout the night. No surprise, we're in the middle of the woods. I'm used to animals stalking around outside my camp. I knew there were 2 animals, one each side of us. It was at about that point when we heard a bird chirp. It came from about the place I figured one of the animals were, then another from the opposite side. I immediately realized we were being watched and stalked by at least 2 cougars. We very quickly climbed into the back of my truck. It's got a camper shell and is outfitted for truck camping. Story 9. Back when my son was only about a year old, my husband worked second shift, so I was alone every evening. We lived in townhouses at the time and had a neighbor who was a war vet. My husband was friendly with his war vet. It was a little off in the sense that there was very obvious PTSD and other traumas, but all around a nice dude. Anyway, one evening this guy knocked on the door. I opened it thinking he probably was looking for my husband, and I was just gonna let him know he was working. Dude was super drunk, wouldn't stop talking, and kinda made his way into the house. He also brought his huge German Shepherd with him. I was trying to be friendly, but I had the worst feeling in my stomach. Felt insanely vulnerable, like something wasn't right in the situation. I kept trying to tell him in the nicest way to leave, but he wouldn't. I texted my husband, hey, neighbor guy's here and won't leave. He's trashed. I feel really uncomfortable. My husband texted his buddies that lived a few apartments down, and they came over immediately. They got the dude out of the house, and not even 20 minutes later, I hear noises outside, and this guy is trying to rip the license plate off my car. My husband's friends heard it or saw it, I'm not really sure, but they came over and were more aggressive about him going home and leaving me alone. And he did, so I thought. A few hours later, my husband gets home and sees this guy hanging out crouched behind some cars. He goes up to him and asks him exactly what the F he's doing. I don't know the exact details because I stayed hiding in the house, but this guy had ropes and some other weapon on him. Story 10. Driving Uber one night a couple years back, I picked up 4 guys from a club. Listening to them talk, I realized that 2 guys, one of them ordered the ride, had met the other 2 at the club and were on the way to get coke from one of their cousins. There was an odd vibe. Some of the conversation didn't seem the most linear, and I was hyper aware that these drunk dummies were heading with 2 strangers to a drug deal. I was the one driving them. I did not want drugs in my car, and I was very aware that we might be on the way to an ambush. If we'd been heading anywhere remote or sketchy, I had to figure out how to end the ride. The 2 wannabe dealers kept trying to get in touch with their cousin via cell phone. Went to an apartment just off a main street, and after I had gone into the building, I just said, should we leave the guys? And we did. I still don't know if it was just a play for a free ride, guys too drunk or dumb to pull off a basic coke deal, or something nefarious that didn't finish. Story 11. Hiking in the Rocky Mountains on a trail I knew pretty well. I was leading a group of kids, maybe 20 or so middle school age children from the camp where I work. I turned a corner and saw a jawbone of a deer. Pretty cool. I showed it to the kids. Didn't have any flesh on it, so I assumed it was pretty old. 100 feet further down the trail, I find another bone. Femur maybe. I specialized in insect populations, not deer anatomy. This one looked a bit fresher. Another ways down, another bone. I'm getting a little nervous at this point, so I explained that we should probably turn around and head back. My students all groaned that they wanted to see more dead stuff, but I shepherded them down the train and back to camp. 2 days later, we got a call at the camp that someone had been attacked in the area by a mountain lion. Apparently, a mountain lion had set itself up in the caves on the cliffside, and it had gotten angry when someone got too close. Even if my students would have loved to see more dead stuff. I mean, no, this guy definitely did the right thing, because, yeah, the students wanted to see more dead stuff, but I don't think they wanted to be the dead stuff, you know? What would you even do in that situation? I'm gonna be honest, yeah, you're outnumbering the mountain lion, but I imagine the mountain lion could probably take out 20 kids. I don't see it having any issue. So yeah, they definitely dodged a bullet there. Story 12. I don't tell this story often, but this seems like a good place. Back in college, I used to drive up the Oregon coast on weekends, and then just crash in my car when I got tired. I woke from a nap in the driver's seat, and something just didn't feel quite right. It was just dusk, and the light was fading pretty fast. I yawned and stretched, and as I did, so I turned my head to the side and just caught a face ducking down below my rear passenger window. I went to hit the lock button just to make sure, and in my panic, I accidentally unlocked the doors briefly, and then locked them again. I stared at the window for a few minutes, knowing that someone was crouching just out of sight. Eventually, I started the car and thought I heard a scuffing sound. Whoever it was didn't reappear, but that was enough for me. As I noped out of there and pulled out back onto the highway 101, I glanced back, and a bald figure in a red t-shirt with something wrapped around his face booked it into the woods on the side of the road. That was the end of that weekend trip. I drove the 2 hours back to my dorm room. White-knuckled hands locked on the steering wheel. I had to pull over a few miles down the road, though, to deal with the adrenaline shakes. Yeah, when you get the shakes from adrenaline, it is no joke. Story 13. Once when I was 8 years old, I lived in a trailer park with mostly normal, but occasionally sketchy folks around. I wasn't really bored at home and asked my parents if I could walk up the street to my friend's house. Not very far, maybe just 1 out of sight of my parents' trailer. It was the middle of the day and we knew a lot of people on our street, so my parents said yes. So here I am, an 8-year-old little girl walking to my friend's house. Just as I got out of sight, I saw an adult man walking towards me straight ahead. I immediately had my alerts on, because I was alone of course, and had never seen this dude before. I keep hoping it veers off on another course away from me, but he keeps coming towards me, and I notice his eyes are locked on me, and he's smiling. It got the creeps, but I was pretty close to my friend's house now. I looked around and realized there wasn't anyone else outside to witness anything. He finally gets close enough to say something to me, and this is what made me run. He said, "Hey, do you think you could take your shoes off? Please, I want to see your feet." And I said, "Huh? What?" And he asked me again to see my feet. Y'all, I turned around and sprinted so fast back to my house. I was terrified. Story 14. When I was 27, my girlfriend lived in a crappy part of Hollywood, Florida, near US 1. She had a kid pretty young, but the dad ended up going to jail for assault. The place she could afford was run down AF, with all sorts of addicts and genuine lowlifes living in the units around her. She hated the place. She couldn't move in with me because I was just renting a room where I lived. It was better than living at her parents' though. Drunk, abusive dad, addict mom. I went to visit her after my shift ended at 9 p.m., picked up some food, and planned to cook for her. We went there for about an hour just sitting on the couch, watching her kid play with a box. Then the banging started on the door. She looked terrified thinking it's her ex. I'm kind of freaked out also because I heard all these stories about him. Some guys cursing, hitting something against the door hard. We don't even peek through the window or peephole thinking he's got a gun. We call the police, but the operator is having a tough time hearing. Then we hear some other woman screaming and cursing. He had the wrong door. We hear them fighting, smashing, more screaming. Sounds like she's spitting and we hear punches. We're not sure if it's her or him, but it's loud. The 911 operator says police are on their way. The kid starts screaming because he's scared. The man outside starts banging on the door again. He thinks his kid is with us and shouts he's going to kill us for taking his kid. My girlfriend just breaks down at this point and starts crying. Maybe 10 minutes later, the police arrive. They arrest both of them and took our statements. She moved out a couple of days later and we ended up renting another crappy apartment, but in a much better area. Story 15. I used to work on an ambulance, and the company that I worked for had more ambulances than there were firehouses/medic stations to keep up with the increasing call volumes. So we would do something called posting, which is where you park the ambulance somewhere within the area that you are servicing while you wait for a call. I was working the midnight to 10 a.m. shift one night and it was really slow. On slow nights, we would try to find the darkest areas we could find a post in an attempt to catch some sleep. We'd find a church within a neighborhood whose parking lot had virtually no light, so we decided to park there. As soon as my partner put the rig in park, I instantly felt incredibly uncomfortable and unsafe. I didn't want to say anything to my partner as I literally had no reason to feel the way I was, but the feeling was almost overwhelming. A few minutes go by and my partner looks at me and says, "Hey man, I don't feel right. Something just feels off. Do you want to get out of here?" I replied, "Yes," and we got the hell out of there. I've never really figured out why we both had this sensation and why it came on in that church's parking lot, but it sure gave me the creeps. Story 16. A little bit different than the rest of the stories, but it gave me chills. My mom's best friend owns a farm about a half hour from where I grew up. We went there nearly every weekend to help with upkeep and caring for our horses. All day you could just feel a storm brewing. The wind, humidity, outside had a greenish tint, and the clouds rolling in as the sun was settling. Right after supper, it was raining hard. A lot of wind and lightning too. I was looking out the window across the yard and thought I saw something above the barn on the far side of the yard. I was petrified. It looked like rotation in the clouds, and it started lowering down. I pointed it out to my dad. He said it was rain bouncing off the roof of the barn. We both looked out for a moment and clearly saw it suck back up into the clouds. I got goosebumps. We looked at each other for a second in disbelief. Then he shrugged and went back in the living room. I sheltered in the bathroom. The next day, we saw on the news that a F4 tornado ripped through a small town, Spencer, SD, about 24 miles from where we were. I got chills when I saw the news report. Story 17. So, I've never had a really scary experience, but I did have an experience once where I went into panic mode and all I could think of was escaping the situation. I had this friend in college who really liked to drink. She had a big house to herself, so we would drink together a lot. One night, we were outside smoking, and one of her neighbors comes up the driveway to his door and is chatting with my friend. Eventually, he invites us over for drinks and gaming. He shares the house with another guy. They're both young military guys. We're there for a while. We have a few drinks, played Worms on the 360, and they got to show off their entertainment setup, which for the time was enviable. They were really cool guys. We're shooting the crap, and one gets up and just says, "Be back in a second." He leaves for a minute or two and then comes back. He walks in the room and stands facing the other guy who also stands up. They're just staring intensely at one another for a while and things get real awkward. My friend and I are just weirded out. Then the one who had left reaches down, unzips his pants, and whips his chicken out. I'm going to preface this by saying I have no problem with LGBTQ+. I don't care what any other consenting adults do in their free time, but I don't exactly want a front row seat. As the other guy proceeds to get into a kneeling position, I am in a full panic. I'm grasping at my friend, whisper talking, "Nah, please, we have to leave." She stares, slack-jawed, unmoving. I'm just about to start climbing over the couch to escape when the guy kneeling firmly grasps the other dude's shaft and then yanks the whole thing right out. Then proceeds to get the most realistic rubber chicken you have ever seen to his forehead by a suction cup at its base, and the two of them laugh uncontrollably. I lost many a night to a booze-filled blackout with that friend of mine. I will never forget that one in 100 years. Yeah, just one of those things where, like, it's just, oh, you can tell their humor's just so warped. Like, they're over there thinking that's, like, the funniest thing ever, but it's like, truly, that's just such a freaky situation.